leaders often encounter situations that that put them kind of in the middle of a lot of interest groups or opposing points of view, but they're all very interested in the welfare of students. So how as middle-level leaders have we kind of seen some of these issues or dealt with some of these issues, and how have you actually done that? Could you talk a little bit about that, Jill?
Sure. One of my favorite questions when I go into a school is, if I stopped 3 different people in the hallway and asked them what are the 2 or 3 things this school stands for or you are working on, would I get the same answer? And quite often, whoever I'm talking with sort of looks down at the floor or says, no, probably not. And the more I thought about that, I relate that to a conversation you and I, Chris, had with the superintendent of the Detroit Public Academy for Public Service. That's not the name of it.
Public
Service Academy. Yes, it's a charter school. And she was explaining how they were very clear about what they stood for. And I thought, oh, I'm very jealous of that, because I'm not sure that as public schools we are ever that clear to what we stand for as far as how kids are supposed to be educated. Most of the mission and vision things I've worked on, they've been good, and I've liked them, but you know, they could go for any other school. So I often wonder if we had been clearer about how kids, our beliefs about how kids learn, and we use that consistently as the lens that we look through with as we made decisions, whether that would have helped us avoid some of the conflicts we had. Now, not all, because I know in a public school we've got people with very different beliefs about how kids should be educated, so there's always that issue. But if we continuously, and it has to be continuously, because in a middle school you've got new kids and families filtering in, rotating through every 2 or 3 years, but we're continually renewing what we believe is the best way to educate kids, and helping the families coming in to understand and to offer their input, whether we would avoid some of the pitfalls that we fall into. There's some we wouldn't, I understand that. But I wonder about that clarity of what we actually believe about teaching. Because most of the conflicts I had with a principal or a parent or another colleague was a philosophical stance on what was best for kids. And I often didn't have a school set of beliefs that I could fall back on.
Great. Thanks, Jill. Cedric, what are your thoughts on these dilemmas?
So the way we handled conflict resolution in our school when I was principal, so we set up we established collaboratively some non-negotiables. And then we would review our goals and action items and provide and receive feedback on a regular basis. So any decision that needed to be made was always vetted through the non-negotiables. Is this something that we want to see? Is something we can stand on as a school, and something that's fair for our students? And then we review that on a regular basis. So it minimizes a lot of the conflict when you already have a system or a process in place that everybody can point to. So we called it the lens of the 10. There were 10 non-negotiables that we had in our school that we absolutely have to have in each of our classrooms and then throughout our school building. So any title money that was spent, any of the big decisions that were made by teams was always run through the lens of the 10. So it minimized a great deal of the conflict. And because of that, we grew as a middle school staff together.
Great. Thanks, Cedric. Vicky, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this speaks a little bit to what Patty said in the last comment about how we define things is always important. I read the question a little bit differently, maybe just because I was excited about it, because one of the things that we teach an awful lot about is resolving ethical dilemmas, and those are not issues between right versus wrong, but those are issues of right versus right. When you have two conflicting groups of people who both want what's best for kids, it just depends on which kids they're talking about. And Rushworth Kidder's work on this is brilliant, and we use it in our classes, and I would just encourage every educator to read it. One of his key books was How Good People Make Tough Choices. And he talks about 4 different ethical dilemmas. The individual versus the individual versus a larger group, short versus long term, justice versus mercy, and truth versus loyalty. Mm. And those are the really tough decisions that you have to take on as a school leader, because what's right for one child, what's best for the student, may not be what's best for students in general. What's right now, what may not be what's best in the long run, et cetera, et cetera. The ability to resolve those kinds of issues comes down to the leader's creativity. The leader's integrity. Speaks to what Lori was talking about earlier in terms of relationships, and also speaks to courage and communication. Because when you have to make a decision that you know one of your constituencies is opposed to, and you know they have good reason for it, but you're deciding for the other right, then you've got to be able to defend it, and you've got to be able to stand by it in terms of why you went with that particular side of the paradigm at that time. It takes tremendous courage, takes tremendous communication, and it has to be grounded in the positive relationships that you've built with people, so that they continue to respect your integrity and your true belief in doing what's best for kids. It takes a while to establish that with your constituency, but it's something that every good leader really has to master, because the easy decisions are right versus wrong. Those are easy. The tough decisions are right versus right.
That's great. Thanks, Vicki. Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm still trying to absorb what Vicki just said. That was wonderful. I got to think some more about that. You know, when I look at Breaking Ranks and This We Believe, both those documents speak to the importance of vision. And this is sort of like what Cedric was just talking about. You know, Breaking Ranks says the principal leads in developing and articulating and committing to a shared vision and mission focused on student success. This We Believe words it a little bit differently. A shared vision developed by all stakeholders guides every decision. So I think if as a school leader you have succeeded in creating that vision, that you have brought that and nurtured it and grown it so it's believed and shared and understood by all your stakeholders, then when you're faced with a decision, I guess this is more the wrong versus right decision, how does it measure up against the school's vision? Is it moving you closer to it, or is it moving you further away from where you're headed and what you believe in? Maybe the simply way is we just have to keep asking ourselves, is this decision what's right for kids? I have a colleague who cautions us against the ABCs, administration by convenience. And sometimes doing that requires a lot of courage and internal fortitude to make sure that we're doing what's right for kids, not just simply what's convenient for adults.
Yes, there we go. Drew.
You know, without sounding pithy, I was thinking of Shakespeare's King Lear, and with this question, and he asks his 3 daughters to profess their love to him, and his 2 daughters, Goneril and Regan, say very elaborate things to prove their love, and Cordelia says nothing. Cordelia says, "I cannot throw my whole heart in my throat, in my mouth," and he gets upset about that. And I think it speaks to this question in that we sometimes, when it comes to conflict, we don't use the 2 objects on either side of our heads as much as we use our mouths, which obviously is contrary to what we're doing here today. But I think with any encounter, it starts with listening, and it starts with the leader's approach from a non-confrontational standpoint. you know, you just have, you listen to their side, understand their concerns and acknowledge them. You don't have to agree. Just show an interest and appreciate that they are interested in caring about education. I mean, that's where I come in and think about it that way. And then, of course, you don't stand mute, though. Of course, you share your school's position and explain why the decision is best for all students in your schoolhouse. But, I think we need to also remember that what happens when they leave the encounter matters, too. When they leave your office or when they leave your classroom after you've talked it out, what happens then? There's no such thing as a one-act play in educational leadership, that there's going to be an act two with multiple scenes throughout. You got to have follow-up.
Oof. So this question reminds me of a couple things. First, when I got my first administrative position, assistant principal at a high school, like some of my colleagues here, the previous assistant principal left me an article wrapped up with some tea bags, and the tea bags were obviously for me to kind of relax and enjoy myself from time to time. But the article was entitled Quadrivalence, and that's a concept out of chemistry where you have molecules that have two charges. They're bivalent. They have a plus and a minus. Quadrivalence is a molecule that has more than two charges. And what the point was is that in leadership, we are often faced with quadrivalence, meaning that almost all the situations that we find ourselves in have more than two sides, and that gets at that right versus right, and that a good leader doesn't actually try to balance those forces. A good leader determines which of those directions that they're going to go in, and they reconcile themselves to the fact that in order to do the right thing, they will make people unhappy. And the wisdom is that you make the right people unhappy if it comes down to that. So quadrivalence, it's just a way of kind of reconciling that none of us is wise enough to make everyone happy. And in fact, there's an old adage that says, if you try to make everyone happy, you will make no one happy. And then the other piece is comes out of some work that Jill and I did with a school in Philadelphia. And I thought this was pretty cool. When they were trying to make decisions, they kind of put it through this sieve, if you will. They said, we would do what's best for students first. So students would come first, teachers would come second, and administration would be last. And the way that was that played out was that teachers were very willing to be inconvenienced, if you will, or to work harder or do things that they might not necessarily want to do if they believed that it was in the best interest of students and that it was not administration by convenience, so that they were fine with being second to the students as long as administration was third. And of course, any administrator worth his or her salt would be fine with that because the students would be coming first. So I thought that was a very interesting way to kind of look at that balance. And so, Lori, what are your thoughts?
Well, I became a principal at a very young age. I will admit to you that I didn't know how to be a principal. I didn't know how to be a good leader. All I did, I was the fourth principal in 5 years in a building that had been open 5 years earlier. I spent the first year surviving. And I think that actually put me at a disadvantage in my next couple of years because I had to react so quickly to everything because I was worried about doing everything correctly. And what I've learned is when there's conflict, truly there are very few decisions that have to be made quickly. There are very few decisions that time doesn't benefit. I've learned that unless someone's safety is at risk, usually taking time to step back, consider the full consequences of decisions, solicit input when necessary, that's what makes a good decision. And then in making that decision, you know, I really appreciated what Jill said earlier about a school truly believing in something, about a school truly standing for something. And when she asked that question, would there be people, if I asked them, what would they say? I got to admit, I pridefully sat back and thought, I think my teachers could answer it. I do. But we've been together for 9 years, and I think that one of the problems you see today is when something's not working, let's boot the principal real quickly. Let's transition, let's move people, let's change. And I think the lack of stability is one of our major problems. I do. I think that moving people in and out before you have a time to see what's right. I think that we're too often to be pressured to make quick decisions in education. And I've found unless someone's immediate safety is involved, you know what, I don't have to make quick decisions. I'm confident enough in myself now to know whom I need to consult, who I need to work with, who I need to talk to. And you know, sometimes those decisions seem inconsequential, they seem insignificant. Maybe, you know, it's a silly, upset student, parent, teacher, or we didn't have the right cookies in the cafeteria. Those kind of things are meaningful to kids, especially at middle school. And when you take time to think through them and you make your decisions based on your mission and vision, if, as Jill said, you have a true mission and vision, if, as Jill said, people really believe in what you're about, then it's real easy to make decisions on that. And I've found it's easy to make hard decisions. I used to have such internal conflict when I had to tell someone a response they didn't want to hear. And I don't struggle with that as much anymore because I know that I'm making the decision after thoughtful consideration, after taking time to consider all input, after collaborating with people that need to give input, and then based on our mission and vision and what we've all agreed is best for our school. And so it's real easy, even with a colleague I have a very close relationship with, to say, I'm sorry, I don't agree. Based on our mission and vision, based on what I've looked at, this is what we're going to do anyway. And then there aren't usually hurt feelings, because there are times too when I'm wrong. When in weighing the decision that I was going to make, I'm able to see the other input was better. And when teachers see me admit that I'm wrong and change my mind or go a different avenue, they're willing to do the same thing when their initial reaction wasn't going to be best for kids either. And so it really has decreased strife and internal conflict and hurt feelings because we all believe in the same thing. We all believe in building relationships with students so that students will be successful. We all believe that believing in students makes a difference. And we all believe in striving to reach and motivate students. Our mission of striving to reach and motivate students is accomplished through our vision. Get them to school, keep them safe once they're here, build relationships with them, make them see that they matter and make them feel that they matter, and then teach. So whenever we're making decisions, does it meet our mission and vision? We live and breathe that mission and vision. And so not making quick, irrational decisions, making decisions based on something truly we believe in has made conflict so much easier to deal with. And I've got to say, Drew, on a separate note, you and I would have been great team teachers in high school together.
That is for true. That is.
I have that passion for Shakespeare.
Well, to thine own self be true, Lori.
Absolutely.
There we go. Wow. So there's a lot here to digest, just among ourselves and certainly with our audience, our YouTube audience. I think that you know, Vicki, Lori, Patty, Jill, Drew, Cedric. It's been amazing to have this conversation with you all. I think what's great is that it's been archived, which is good because so much has been said. We can come back to it. What I'd like to do before I hand it back to Patty and Drew is I'd like to invite our YouTube audience to, as they watch this series, you do have the opportunity to make comments. and you can ask questions of us or of one another. You can give us your insights, and I invite you to do that, and I invite you to subscribe to this channel. And also remember that we are being sponsored by the two national associations. So I will turn that over to our sponsors. Patty?
I would just like to say goodbye on behalf of NASSP and thank you for joining us and for all the people who participated in the panel. It was great. This is a learning experience for us as well. We're trying out some new technology, but we think it has a lot of potential. If you've read the book Disrupting Class by Clayton Christensen, you know, he talks about you just get in and start things and it gets better. So as this series progresses, we hope to bring other people into the circle. We hope to be able to do some of these broadcasts live so people can participate with us. And just thank you very much for joining us. Drew, you want to say a few last words?
Sure, sure. On behalf of the Association for Middle Level Education and myself personally, I could say thank you so much for everyone here in the virtual room for your time and effort and energy this afternoon, and for everyone out there in the YouTube world watching. As Chris said, please comment, please respond and reflect, and let's keep this conversation going to raise the praise for the middle level.